Nikola Tesla was a brilliant inventor who spent most of his career in the USA. He was an electrical engineer and produced works which explored the idea of radio and wireless transmissions. Nikola Tesla was conducting research in 1895, and this was when he got his first indication that space and time might be influenced by using a highly magnetic field. A part of the admission had come from Tesla experimenting with radio frequencies, along with power transmission through the Earth's atmosphere. The discovery would many years later lead to the alleged Philadelphia experiment, along with time travel programs. However, a long time before the military programs were even thought about. Tesla had already made some discoveries that were fascinating in regards to nature of time, and the possibilities of being able to travel through time. Allegedly, the very first experience that Tesla had travelling in time occurred in March 1895. A New York reporter wrote that he found the inventor sitting in a caf, after he'd just been hit with 3.5 million volts of electricity. The reporter said that Tesla had told him that it would not be very pleasant company to be around, due to the fact he'd been hit with this many volts. He went on to say that a 3-foot spark had jumped into the air and hit him on the shoulder. Tesla went on to tell the reporter that when he was in contact with the resonance from the electromagnetic charge, he had found that he went out of his space and time window. He said that he'd been able to see the past, the present and the future at the very same time. He admitted that he'd been paralysed in the electromagnetic field, and so had been unable to help himself. It's been suggested this technology was used on the Philadelphia experiment. The object was to render the ship invisible by wrapping it in thick cables, through which a high-frequency signal from a system of generators and Tesla coils was induced. The results were disastrous. When activated, the ship generated a green fog and disappeared from Philadelphia, reappearing in Norfolk Harbor 24 hours later. However, as with many time travel stories, there is no evidence that he did any sort of time travel. Many people the world over believe that life exists or once existed on Mars, and over the years many mysterious objects have been discovered on the planet. In this video we take a look at an alleged UFO hovering above Mars. Now before I start, it's important to remember that UFO stands for Unidentified Flying Object. It's only been in the last few decades that UFOs have somehow been connected to alien life. As I've mentioned before, most sightings can be explained. One of my subscribers sent me this photo a while back. She stated that she was on the Mars Rover app and came across these photos. She said the following: "I couldn't believe what I found. The strange object looks to be hovering. I have no idea what it is. You can clearly see the space between the craft and the surface. This really is a great capture. I can't think of what this object could be. Perhaps it's some type of illusion. I'm interested to hear your theories, so don't forget to leave a comment." Earth is the only place we know for certain supports life. Many claims have been made by observers who thought they saw evidence of life on Mars, but we now know they were tricked by very difficult measurements. From Earth, even with our most powerful telescopes, we cannot see enough detail on Mars to answer this question. While robotic spacecraft have given us wonderful views, no humans have ever tried to journey to Mars, and no such missions will be attempted for many years. In the meantime, NASA is working very hard to discover whether there is life on Mars. The United States and other countries have been sending spacecraft to orbit or land there since the 1960s, and each mission tells us more about this fascinating planet. We have learned that even though Mars is more similar to Earth than anywhere else in the solar system, and therefore is a good place to look for life, it's still different from Earth in many ways. A compass points to the North Pole on Earth because our whole planet acts like a giant magnet, but Mars does not act this way. Besides turning a compass needle, Earth's magnetic field turns away any dangerous particles of space radiation. Without a magnetic field on Mars, and with much less air than on Earth, more harmful space radiation reaches its surface. Although some measurements tells us there probably is water on Mars, there is far less than on Earth, and it's so cold there that most of its water is probably not liquid but rather is ice. Overall, Mars would be a pretty uncomfortable place to try and live. Here is another unidentified flying object spotted above the red planet. It matches similar objects seen here on Earth, Most people have never heard of pareidolia, but nearly everyone has experienced it. Anyone who has looked at the moon and spotted 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth has felt the pull of pareidolia. It's the imagined perception of a pattern where it does not actually exist. It's picking a face out of a knotted tree trunk, or finding zoo animals in the clouds. But many have questioned how this can be pareidolia. We can clearly see an object hovering in the sky. Guesses for what it is range from atmospheric phenomena to meteorites. The face appearances in Belmez began on August 23, 1971, when Maria Gomez claimed that a human face formed spontaneously on a concrete kitchen floor. Maria's husband Juan Piera and their son Miguel destroyed the image with a pickaxe, and a new concrete was laid down. However, the Piera story goes a new face formed on the floor. The mayor of Belmez was informed and forbid the destruction of the new face. Instead, the floor concrete was cut out and taken for study. Maria's home was advertised to the tourists as the House of the Faces. By Easter of 1972, hundreds of people were flocking to the house to see the faces. For the next 30 years, the Piera family claimed the faces continued to appear, both male and female of different shapes and sizes, and even showing different expressions. More and more faces continued to appear on the floor of Maria Piera's kitchen, attracting thousands of visitors every day. In time, she discovered the house was built around 1830, and apparently stood above a graveyard used by the Romans and medieval Christians. But did Maria just paint the faces herself? If so, she never benefited financially from all the attention. She lived a simple life in that same house, and eventually died in 2004. Claims suggest the faces were manifested on the floor by telekinesis. This notion was based on the claim that the expressions on their faces used to change with the mood of Maria Piera. Of course, scientists have found it possible to analyse the molecular changes in the whitewash, and prove that some fakery was involved. Many believe that the paintings were actually created by Maria's son, but because he hasn't admitted to this, it still remains a mystery. In East London stands the most famous pub in Jack the Ripper history, the 10 Bells. Constructed in 1752, the 10 Bell was where several of the victims of Jack the Ripper drank, most notably Catherine Eddowes and Mary Kelly. The pub has changed very little since the early hours of November 9, 1888, when Mary Kelly, Jack the Ripper's final victim, left the pub. Her body was discovered the next morning in Miller's Court of Dorset Street on the opposite side of the road from the 10 Bells. During the 1970s and 80s, the pub was renamed by the landlord as Jack the Ripper. The Bureau reverted it back to its original name in 1989. In the late 1990s, live-in staff whose bedrooms were on the upper floors of the pub were complaining of alarming encounters with the ghost of an old man dressed in Victorian clothing. Staff reported they would often be awoken in the early hours of the morning to find the phantom form of the old man lying beside them on the bed. As soon as they would cry out in shock, the ghostly figure would vanish. Staff with no previous knowledge of this ghost would often report seeing him, and their descriptions would always be the same. A tenant who lived on the premises in 2001 would often hear phantom footsteps followed by the faint sound of laughter outside his door. This happened when he was the only one on the premises. When going down the stairs to the bar, he would often be pushed hard on the back by invisible hands. Several times this resulted in him ending up in a heap at the bottom of the stairs. A psychic was brought into the pub to see what she could pick up. Upon reaching the top floor, she paused outside one of the rooms and refused to go any further. She said that she could sense that something terrible had happened in that room, and was almost certain that it involved the death of a baby in the 19th century. Lindsay Civita, a leading researcher and expert on the Jack the Ripper crimes, was being shown around the pub a few years later and had been allowed access to the roof space. She noticed some material embedded in the floor behind the water tank, and pulling at it found it was a sack tied at the top. Opening it, she found it contained a mouldy set of Victorian baby clothes that appeared to have been slashed with a knife. Intriguingly, the tank was directly over the room that the psychic had refused to enter. A friend of this seller used to work at a brickyard back in the 1980s. Sometimes his friends would make statues out of the unhardened clay during his time off, and then paint them. A lot of the other workers at the brickyard would also do the same. This was one of those statues, although its story is slightly different from the others. A man named William made this bust, which he based on himself. He painted it and wrote the word future on his chest in quotes. Not long after, a tragic accident occurred, and he was crushed to death. The next day, the seller's friends saw the statue sitting where William had left it, and decided to take it home. That's when strange things began to happen. Noises began to occur at his home. He found himself woken up late one night by the sounds of someone walking in circles, though no one was there. Later, he heard a door slamming though found no doors closed, and then one night he saw a dark mist moving near his den's wall. He finally realised the source of his problems when the dog began to avoid the statue with fear in her eyes. That's when he decided to part ways with it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.